Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of our Conference of Consulting Actuaries Leadership Development Interview Series. My name is Michael Clark, host of the CCA's Leadership Development Podcast. I'm joined today by my guest, Adrienne Lieberthal. Adrienne, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So just to give a brief introduction on Adrienne so that if you don't know her, you'll get to know her here quickly. Adrienne is the CEO and founder of Athena Actuarial Consulting, which she founded in late 2020. She's based in Minneapolis, and since founding Athena, Adrienne has grown her business to include 20 employees serving clients across a broad spectrum of actuarial services. A couple of other interesting tidbits about Adrienne. She was one of the original founders of the Network of Actuarial Women and Allies, NAWA. She's an active member of the CCA's membership committee. She graduated from the University of Virginia, where she was a Division I collegiate student athlete. She was the goalkeeper for the UVA field hockey team, which that's pretty cool.
Thank you.
How long had you been playing field hockey?
Well, I grew up in Pennsylvania, so it's like the sport in like Pennsylvania and the Netherlands. It's like the go-to sport. So, like since elementary school had been playing. Yeah.
Wow. All right. Do you still play?
I coached a little bit after college. I did some goalkeeper coaching. Little goalkeepers are really weird. If you, goalies are like really intense, and it's really fun to do one-on-one trainings. So I did that a little bit post-college. And when I lived in DC, there's a lot of international field hockey clubs that still play as adults. But Minnesota does not know field hockey. So since I've moved here, I've retired.
Fewer opportunities.
Yeah, ice hockey's the game.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
was going to say, yeah, you just need to change the venue and you're fine.
Yeah.
And one last thing about Adrienne, she had her first daughter in December of 2023, Lena. So congratulations and having a 1-year-old running around your house now.
Yes, yes.
It's exciting. Well, Adrienne, I think a lot of our listeners are going to be very intrigued about just your career path on how you started and how you ended up starting your own business. And so I want to talk about that for a little bit. So talk us through a little bit about where your career started and where it went from there.
Yeah, so I first found out what an actuary was actually from a Towers Watson info session at UVA. So grateful to Towers Watson for going to a school that didn't have an actuarial program and introducing the idea of the career. I had heard about actuarial consulting specifically as a way to work with teams and no day is the same, and sounded very exciting, a great way to use math post-college without needing a graduate school degree, which I was very attracted to, maybe not realizing how hard the exams are. So I started my journey. Then I applied for internships and got denied. I was told you need exams. Failed exam P as many do, and was like, whoa, these are actually hard. And then really my senior year started making realizing I was not going to be a professional field hockey player, and then took P on a Monday, FM on a Tuesday. Preseason started Wednesday, and had like the week of my career. Passed my first 2 exams, and then got my first job at Towers Watson. They showed up to those interviews and were like, "What's changed since last year?" And so had my exams. I started in the Arlington office in the pension practice at it was Towers Watson then. I left just as it was becoming WTW. I went to Deloitte to join a growing government actuarial practice, which was really fun to be part of, even a growing business within a business, and really start to see how that works and learn how the sales cycle works in the government marketplace. And so worked at Deloitte and loved being in a management consulting firm. It's a very different experience from an actuarial consulting firm primarily. And then 2020 hit, and started Athena.
That's great. Talk to us a little bit. I think people would be interested in that last comment you made about working for a management consulting firm versus an actuarial consulting firm. You've obviously done both. What did you see were the biggest differences between the two companies?
Yeah, I loved starting my career at Towers. The training, the onboarding, the development is so actuarial focused. It's clearly their business. They've been in it for a long time. They it's the bread and butter of the business. So everyone knows what an actuary is. Everybody appreciates the work that's done. When you go, I'd say Big Four or these bigger management consulting firms where actuarial services are offered, but not the core part of their business. I got to my experienced hire onboarding. They have Deloitte University. It's a really cool campus in Texas. So I got to DU and no one knew what an actuary was. I was like, did I join the wrong company? Am I at the right training? No one knows what an actuary is. They don't. Maybe they've worked on a project in benefits or like in mergers and acquisitions, and there was an actuary called for something they didn't know how to do, so they called the actuary. But you have to learn how to translate your skill set into something that matters to a broader audience. You have to learn how to explain what an actuary is to someone who actually doesn't really care very much. They're just like, oh, like never heard what that is. They don't want like a 15-minute, here's all the ways we add value onto projects. Very succinct, you know, doing a lot of the, have you seen Along Came Polly? Like that, Ben Stiller is an actuary. So I think the biggest difference is how you build a career. And I think while the actuarial consulting firms, my experience at Towers is it was still very much consulting, still problem solving for your clients. It was actually more about what it was like to climb the ranks in the company. Where at a Big Four management consulting firm, you have to be able to translate how what you do is important to clients who aren't even specifically asking for actuarial services. It might just be a small piece.
Interesting. Well, let's talk about that transition then from going from these bigger consulting firms into your own firm. I think a lot of our listeners would be interested in hearing what led you to go down that path to start your own consulting firm.
Yeah, I think that I was sitting there in 2020 and there's some entrepreneurs in my family, so maybe had been drawn to the idea of starting a business, but never really considered it in the actuarial field. It was always just that fun, like watching Shark Tank, like what could you invent? But in 2020, I had been traveling Monday through Thursday for my projects. So March 6, 2020, got back to Seattle where I lived at the time and got off the road and had to get onto these other non-actuarial projects to stay utilized. And, you know, we're all sitting in our house working virtually, and everything was stripped away other than just the work that you were doing. And these virtual, it was the first time we ever used video conferencing. We weren't using it at Deloitte before that, maybe some teams, but we, at that time, I think once everything was stripped away and it was just the work and the people, I realized I really loved the people I worked with. So that was never a problem. And it was a very supportive team that I was on. But I was at that point in my career where I was starting to be subject to the rules, but didn't really understand why the game had to be played that way. And so sitting there, that was my pastime with my now husband in the kitchen, like vision boarding, like what it would look like to run a business that's super people centric, given what we're selling is essentially our people skills in consulting. And I think when I hit that point of feeling a little bit of a cog in a wheel, just a number in this large organization, no different from any large organization. Nothing bad about my employer, but I'd also heard about the women-owned business requirements. So I had the motivation, which I think is the much bigger piece, like the drive, the reason why I wanted to start a company, and then the opportunity, which was that there were these supplier diversity programs that are varying levels of popularity depending on the region and the program, but women-owned business and minority-owned business requirements that either give bonus points if you're pursuing as a prime contractor, or there's maybe a subcontract requirement for a large firm. And I'd been volunteering in the industry and had gotten to know people at a lot of different firms. And I felt like I could activate those relationships to use that as a foot in the door. And all that was flurrying around. And I thought maybe 5 to 10 years from now, I'll jump off and do this. And then something happened in August and I just gave my notice and left. So maybe it's like you have the idea, you have the motivation, you're a little bit pissed off about something, and then you just have to take the leap. Because if I kept running numbers, I never would have left. The numbers
Mhm.
never will tell the whole story.
Interesting. Okay, how scared were you to start this new company?
I was really scared because it's one thing to be told, oh, like just 2 years of financial strain and really needing to build. And then after 2 years, it'll change, like things will change and loosen up. But the point of starting a business is you never know if or when it'll loosen. So you don't know how long you're going to be in that limbo of just trying to get relationships activated and things. So I was really scared, but it was the perfect time in my personal life because I didn't have a lot of financial responsibilities beyond myself. I was living with my boyfriend, so we decided to move to Minnesota because one income, two incomes in Seattle was tough. One income, and living in Seattle, we knew that would be an expensive. Like we aligned all of our finances, everything to make this less stressful. And
Hmm.
so that something that I eventually got a line of credit with a bank, and the banker had said to me that if a business owner is really strained financially, they're going to make bad decisions because they're going to make short-sighted decisions. They're not going to be really thinking strategically because they're going to just need money in the bank account. So
Hmm.
that was one of his reasons for helping me get a bigger line of credit to just loosen things up a little. But I think that was true personally too. If you're really strained and you're only going to have 3 to 6 months, you're not really going to be able to get things going because you'll be too hyper focused on getting that cash flow.
Yeah, that's interesting. All right, so you're 4 years in now, and I'm sure there have been lots of lessons learned over that 4 year period of time. Obviously, you've been successful so far, growing the business to 20 employees, which is awesome. Um, what have been your biggest kind of takeaways from these last 4 years and the experience of running Athena?
I think I finally understood why some of the rules of the game existed over time. You can say, I hate policies, I hate utilization, I like, oh, that stuff's so stupid. It's all, a lot of it is necessary. So over time, we've added it back in strategically. I think that going from 0 to 5 employees was the first kind of hard, which was, uh, you're really needing to have it align with the projects coming in, which can be so hard in our business in general to just time things perfectly. So there was a lot of hard work of like picking up the slack myself and just pulling all-nighters, doing the work myself to make sure that it was the quality I wanted. And I didn't have the cash to hire people.
Mhm.
And then from 5 to 10, we started to be able to make some strategic hires, bringing in people who would help sell and manage projects. 10 to 20 was the hardest because it was enough people. You actually need a management structure. So from 5 to 10, maybe we could just ship someone a computer and be like, get to work, tell Adrienne what you're working on. And then 10 to 20, I couldn't keep a pulse on everyone. So we needed systems, processes, manager relationships, teams. We needed an infrastructure, and we still were strapped in terms of being able to afford it. Once we, I think, approached 20, it started to loosen up a little so we can host our team for in-person gatherings to really create that culture that we want. We can augment benefits, add a 401k, like start to actually be a real grown-up employer. So I think we're now in the teenager phase, I'd say, of growing up. We just had our bat mitzvah, but we're still. I'm just learning all the time what things existed for a reason that maybe we need some form of, and then what things do we still want to keep challenging and really try and find ways to navigate differently.
Mhm.
But I'd say the biggest thing I've learned is how amazing it is if you just get people together who really care about each other and hand them a computer, they generally do pretty well.
Well, and anybody that goes and looks at your website, they can see you've got people scattered across the U.S. It's not like you've got, it's not like everybody's there in Minneapolis with you. And part of that, I think, comes out of the pandemic and the fact that remote work is a lot easier than it was pre-pandemic. But how has that been? I mean, you've been able to hire people wherever they're at.
It's great for accessing talent. Minneapolis does have a lot of actuarial talent, especially in healthcare with all the insurance, but it's just great to not be limited based on where somebody lives. It would be really hard to convince somebody to move to Minneapolis who's not lived like in the Arctic. So I have an appreciation for being able to let people work where they want. I think what I've realized is the first reaction to remote work, especially in larger companies trying to figure out what to do right now, is to micromanage more or do those, just have more insight into what people spend their time on, almost watch the activity virtually. I think that reaction I've realized is it's only necessary if you don't have the right people. If you have the right people who are motivated by the right things and they're there for the right reasons, they do their work and they do it when it works for them, whether that's in a different time zone or one of my business partners is like a vampire and does her best work from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. So I think there's just people are doing work when their brain is more active and therefore performing better. But it only works for people who are, again, there for the right reasons, because there's a lot of loopholes. There's nobody watching. For us, there's nobody holding your hand and making sure you're billing the right time. We really trust our people. That was part of the systems, is we're watching time mostly to make sure people aren't, working crazy hours and we're not aware. But it's been good for accessing talent, but I'd say a challenge for training new people who are fresh out of school. And giving them the attention they need. I learned Excel shortcuts from sitting next to someone and seeing what they were doing on their desk. So I think you have to get way more creative in training and development, which is a big focus for us this year, and doing more virtual intentional trainings. But it doesn't just happen organically. You have to work at it to make culture in a virtual environment.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. All right. So I'm sure with any business you have ups and downs, but when you look over the last 4 years, what have been some of your favorite moments so far?
A couple that come to mind. Our first large prime contract with the federal agency was very exciting. We got a woman-owned small business, sole source. It's a not highly utilized contract vehicle. So it was really cool to be able to demonstrate to ourselves that that's a good opportunity that we should keep activating. But just such a win. They'd never gone with a small business in the 40 years that it had been procured. So that was really exciting. Others, we do an annual gathering in Minneapolis. So I just have a great vision at the Mall of America of everyone in their Athena t-shirts riding the roller coasters. That was a really fun day. Anytime we get our people together, you can just see how the culture has taken on a life of its own. At our last gathering, there was a live trade of Pokemon cards that they'd been planning virtually. And the first time they met, they exchanged Pokemon cards. And it was like, it's just so funny how people even got to the part of the conversation that they both like Pokemon cards as adults. That's been fun. Anything where I've had the chance to watch people grow and thrive and create a career at Athena is pretty surreal. Not just getting work done, but they're growing into managers, into leaders with very little training. They're just having to figure it out. And I think seeing people be that resilient and learning how to grow without all these things that they would have in a bigger company and thrive, it's really special, whether it's grow professionally or grow their family and support them on a parental leave. It's just amazing. Now we have people that have worked here for 3-4 years.
Well, so kind of similar to this, then I'm sure there were things that cropped up that ended up being really hard that you didn't anticipate or didn't expect when you started the company 4 years ago. Any insights on what you've learned from some of those harder experiences that you weren't expecting?
I think the first one is that cash is king, man. You can think, oh, we've got this amazing opportunity and we literally brought 10 full-time employees to start on March 1st, 2023. And it was this awesome opportunity. At the time, we only had 5 people. So we were tripling in size in one day. And I was like, what could go wrong? This is going to increase our revenue. These people, we have this whole onboarding plan. The whole company rallied around recruiting. So everyone's interviewing and not doing their client work, which is, it was fine. We were kind of in a lull while we waited for this work to come in. But we have to pay payroll a couple times before we get paid. And we'll either negotiate to try to make that timeline a little bit shorter, or we got that line of credit, but cash was so tight as we rounded that corner. And you're like, I didn't have the financial systems in place to know when we'd break through it. And then you're still kind of paying yourself back for those couple of months when you were strained. So that was something where I learned too, there was no value to the employees knowing exactly how tight things are. It's not their problem. It's not going to add, it's just going to create stress. And so definitely something I had to carry. And that was a really hard time. But I just kept waking up thinking, let's try something else. So we have a great relationship at a bank. I didn't really realize you need to build a relationship with a banker as a business owner. You need them to advocate for you, especially as a business that's not traditional. They're going to have to underwrite you one off. And so we have somebody who got things on my radar. The SBA has these lines of credit that they'll back part of it. So it helps the bank take more risk. So I think I've learned the value of having a good bank. Really, you need to look at your financials both ways, like looking at an accrual basis, like when the work's getting done, how the revenue is being generated, but also looking at cash constantly. And then the last is sales went really well for a long time, but then I never really had a process or a strategy. So as we scaled and, selling enough work for $3 million a year in revenue, maybe could get us there, but to get to the next level, I needed other people to be selling and I never really systemized it. So just putting more processes in place. Hope is not a strategy when it comes to business development. But apparently activating relationships from happy hours and volunteering and all these other things is a strategy. So, because that's been mine.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So what's next? I mean, you're 4 years into it, a number of employees now. Where are you going from here?
We're in growth mode. We actually had somebody join last week, 2 people join next week. A couple more should be coming this quarter. So as a business, we're growing really fast. We're picking up more opportunities where we get to consult directly to the government. We're also building really great partnerships. I love working with other consulting firms because we really get to learn from each other. And I think it's great for the whole industry for there to be more businesses that are out there operating different ways. And the best partners that we team with really look at us as a differentiator, and either whether it's through the skill sets we bring or just, the opportunity to have additional staff if people are burnt out. So building more partnerships is huge. We have, I'd say, just continuing to build an organizational structure that'll sustain us to that next phase of growth, trying to get to that 40 employee mark. I feel like we're in 20 to 40 is a big jump. And so we have an HR manager, we have people that are fully internal now, a couple of staff that just support the business. And I think that's where we're focused right now, is scaling the back office essentially. But lots of big things on the horizon. All my employees, all the credentialed actuaries at Athena will be headed to the CCA meeting in November or October. So that's what's next for us. Vegas.
Vegas is coming. No,
Yeah.
that's excellent. Well, I'm very happy for you. And it sounds like a lot of exciting things to look forward to. And we'll continue to keep an eye on you and your firm as you go through the next 4 years and see what that brings for Athena. If people are interested in checking out your company, where's the best place for them to go?
AthenaActuarial.com. We're also on LinkedIn, and then I'm personally on LinkedIn. And if anybody's interested in chatting, can shoot me a message. I'm always happy to talk.
Excellent. Well, Adrienne, you're clearly a busy person, yet we mentioned this in the intro with your bio. You still make time to volunteer. So we mentioned the Network of Actuarial Women and Allies. There's the Conference of Consulting Actuaries. You also, I think, have done some volunteering with the SOA. So despite all of these big things that you've got in just running a business, you just articulated all of the challenges and things that are going on and growing your business from where it's been to where it's at to where it's going. Why do you make time to volunteer then?
I've met so many cool people through volunteering, even, the second degree connections of the people that you've met through volunteering, and then the people they know when you're talking to them about what you're trying to achieve. And then even the not so self-serving side of just giving back to profession, who the profession has been really good to me. I love being an actuary. Even though I'm more on the business side at this point in my career, the skills I learned as an actuary have just been invaluable. The ability to forecast things and think about them in a business minded way. The skills have been really valuable to me. So I feel really strongly about giving back and creating opportunity for others through the roles that I take on through volunteership has been really valuable. And just in general, I love the different roles that I've taken on. I sometimes over-indexed on how many volunteer roles I take on, which you see a lot of people, it's either they do like 17 volunteer roles or have never dipped their toe in. So I felt that actually as I started to get ready to have my first daughter, I took a maternity leave step back from my volunteer roles and have slowly added them back in, which was it was a good reset, because what was valuable to you in the first 10 years of your career might shift, and there may be an opportunity to volunteer in a way that brings something different. Right now, I do a lot of volunteering also with different entrepreneurial groups, women in business groups, because I feel really strongly about the opportunity that can be created for yourself and those that you employ through starting a business. So that's been my big focus for the last year.
No, that's excellent. What would you say to people that are maybe thinking about volunteering? Like, I remember back in my early days in the career, all I'd hear from people about volunteering is, "Oh, it's just a way to give back to the profession," which there is an element to that. But from what you've said, it sounds like to you it's more than just giving back. So what would you tell somebody that's thinking about, oh, maybe I want to volunteer, but I'm not really sure what if I should?
You get way more from it than I think you give back. In my experience, I think that I've gotten to meet property casualty actuaries that I never would have crossed paths with at work. I've gotten to hear about ways that actuaries work that, again, never would have been on my radar if I just stayed in my circle at my companies that I worked at. I think that you expand what's possible for your own career by getting to know others and develop these mentor relationships. So, and a lot of volunteer opportunities, you don't have to make it like, oh, I'm going to join this weekly call and spend all this time. A lot of the organizations are sometimes looking for one-off support, whether it's for helping to plan a meeting or helping to plan an event, or if you have an idea that could benefit the organization, if you go to them, a lot of times it's, we've hosted a happy hour in Minneapolis for some of the diversity organizations. And so I think the most impactful thing you can do, even for organizations that do accept donations, your time is way more valuable than anything you could donate. And I think that getting involved will open your eyes to other ways to apply your skills, especially if you're early in your career and you're not yet getting management opportunities at work. The best way to practice would be managing something in volunteer role.
No, I mean that's been my experience as well. I 100% agree with everything you've said there. I mean, it's you definitely get a lot more out of what the time you put in. I wholeheartedly endorse that. Um, well, obviously, this is our CCA Leadership Development podcast, so we'd be remiss not to talk a little bit about leadership and your thoughts on leadership. So, in thinking about people that you consider to be successful leaders, what traits do they have? How do they demonstrate that leadership in their day-to-day lives?
I think the traits that come to mind when I think of leaders that I've really liked working for and with, I think there's a self-awareness more than like self-awareness is in, perfectionism is out. I think that being aware of your strengths as well as your weaknesses and knowing you are who you are, presenting that, being forthcoming that you might be working on something, or I think that that's far more valuable than somebody who has it all figured out. I think that vulnerability and then taking that self-awareness and being being able to talk about it openly, whether it's one-on-one with people who report to you or with a group, I think helps others to see that not everyone has it all figured out, and maybe they could feel more comfortable being vulnerable as well. And then I think empathy is just so critical. It doesn't matter if we're in a pandemic or not, or if someone's going through a hard time or their things are going fine. I think having empathy and recognizing everyone's a whole person, and usually at work, you're only seeing 10% of that whole person. So just really thinking like, is this person, they're probably doing the best that they can. I wonder what's going on in other parts of their life. And as leaders, just the way that I think you can demonstrate that leadership is to really be visible and be yourself and show the highs and the lows, whether it's after a big client meeting to be like, ooh, we made it. I did not have that all figured out. Like I think it's not knowing everything, but having the confidence to know that you can figure it out and conveying that to the people that you lead.
Yeah, actually, that's a very interesting topic. In fact, one that we just posted about in the CCA's Leadership Development Communities online forum. We shared an article from Harvard Business Review that looked at the traits that define executive presence. And there was a survey that was done back in 2012, and then they redid the survey in 2022. And a lot of these characteristics that you're talking about didn't show up in 2012, or if they did, they were ranked a lot lower. And then in 2022, they spiked up quite a bit, especially as it relates to authenticity and that type of, bringing yourself to work type mentality. So I think that's spot on, especially in terms of culturally how things have changed and what people are looking for in leaders as well.
Definitely. I feel like a lot of research is coming out, and maybe there was a pivot with the pandemic when we're like looking through Zoom into people's lives and their kids and their dogs, and things are coming, and you're like, oh, there's this whole other person that maybe I didn't know fully at work, that we got that insight, and now you can't not fully show up at work. And I think I definitely have noticed a shift, and I think it resonates with people when you're yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, a funny story on that front. The pandemic hit during my tenure as president of the CCA. And one of the things that I had set out to do was to do a monthly video message. Again, kind of going back to your point about what you get out of volunteering, it's an opportunity to try some new things. Well, that's one of the things that I was trying out. And early on in the pandemic, one of those videos that I did was from home, and I decided to feature my three boys in it and kind of what life was like working with three boys running around the house as well. And I still get people coming up to me today, several years later, 5 years later, and commenting about how they remember that video.
That's so cool.
Yeah, but it is. I think it did give people a chance to see into people's actual lives, and made people a lot more comfortable with being able to share that as well, and realizing that no, this is part of who I am, and it's okay to show up that way. And I think, to your point, I think people are looking for that today in leaders. They want to know them.
Yeah, and it's impacting the way you show up at work, whether you share it or not. I think it is the leader's job to make sure that there's enough like psychological safety for someone to be able to share something that they think makes them different, at least they perceive, or maybe in reality. And I think that it's a privilege to be able to feel vulnerable easily, like to feel comfortable being able to bring something in the workplace, because I think we also learned that there's people who are intentionally covering some things and not bringing them in. And that for sure is reducing productivity and just overall happiness and well-being. So I think that in terms of what a leader can do, both for themselves, show up with vulnerability, set the example, and then also pave the way to make sure that others really can do it.
Well, and for anybody that might question what you're saying, I mean, you clearly practice what you preach. Again, if people go out to your website, they'll see there's a lot of information in terms of the values of the company and the things that you say are most important to you around being able to show up authentically to work and that whole diversity, equality, inclusion piece of things. Obviously you're putting into practice these traits that you feel strongly about, which is great.
I bet my career on it, literally. So
You did indeed. So, and so far so good, it looks like.
yeah,
So.
yeah.
All right. So when you think about some of your role models when it comes to leadership and these traits that you've described, um, who are some of these people? How have you tried to emulate their examples in how you've developed your business and how you continue to develop your people that are working for you? Who comes to mind?
I've had the privilege to work with a lot of really awesome leaders. And I think you can learn just as much from somebody you really enjoyed working for as you can someone that you didn't, and thinking about why that might have motivated, what might have been motivating them, or like why that was a disconnect for you and how you can not repeat it in leading yourself. I think somebody who I personally am close to that comes to mind, my brother actually is also an entrepreneur. And we've always had a lighthearted competition going. So when I started my business, he's like, I'm gonna start one too. Athena hits 3 million in revenue. He's like, well, we're about to hit 10. So I'm like, new goal is to outpace Ethan's company. But no, we've always had that dynamic as siblings. And I think it's really cool to watch your younger brother. He's just thrive, and he's a really great leader and delegator. He really empowers people to lead around him. Maybe when we were younger, it was perceived as I just was always somehow doing his homework and he was laying on the floor, like laughing at me, like he was delegating to me, to my mom. But really, I think as I've learned, as I'm scaling my business, my way of leading, where I usually would just roll up my sleeves and do things myself, or do the hard work, do the things someone doesn't want to do. It's not very sustainable as you lift off and grow. And as a leader, you might think you're protecting people from doing grunt work or things that are not as fun, but sometimes it's part of the job. And I think that empowering people to see it as an opportunity and to lead themselves and take ownership and accountability of doing that, people really step up when they feel like, oh, I'm accountable for this, so therefore I'm going to step into this leadership position. So I think my brother, I've definitely, I really think he has a great leadership style. I think another role model, I'm a huge fan of Brene Brown, and she has her podcast and obviously a lot of books and research. But I recently listened to the final 2 parts. She's wrapping up the podcast, and she had a 2-part finale. And she talked about how she did a study, her research on whether you think people are doing the best that they can. And most people, if you ask them, do you think people are doing the best that they can? Most people say no, like really emphatically. But those who say yes report feeling less resentment, more compassionate towards others, whether it's peers or people they lead or people they report to. And it's really interesting that mindset shift really benefits the person holding the belief even more than the one you're giving the benefit of the doubt to. So she goes through this exercise where she asks people like clergy and business leaders, and do you think people are doing the very best that they can? And I always like how Brene presents her research, because she'll be like, it's the finding I didn't want to find because I'm not good at that. But I think in her research, she said most people say, hell no, people are not doing the best that they can. That's why I'm mad. That's why I'm annoyed. But she said, think of one person who you think isn't doing the best that they can. And what if I told you I had on high authority that they're doing their very best that they can with the resources they have, the limitations, the circumstances that they were granted? What would you say? And most people are like, oh, I feel horrible. Like, whether I'm thinking of my boss or I'm thinking of someone who reports to me, or like a peer that I'm annoyed I'm doing their work and I resent them. Like, if you hold that belief, like they're doing the best they can, there must be something outside of your view, and that 90% that's not at work. Personally, professionally, I just feel like you're able to draw a boundary, because that doesn't mean you accept the behavior or the way you're treated just on its face. Just because they're doing their best doesn't mean it's enough. But you can set the boundary to be like, oh, that's the best they can. I can decide if that's okay with me. And if it's not, I can make decisions, whether it's to change jobs or to advocate for myself, or to really help this person through what they might be dealing with. You can really think, I mean, people are capable of change, but when it comes to the way that a relationship is going, or something, again, that like direct report relationship at work, if you're going to give your time, energy, and resources to someone or something, now you can think about it as like, you're not like, oh, they didn't use my time effectively, or they didn't, I resent them because they didn't return the favor. I think I listened to that podcast and I've been thinking about it so much in terms of leadership, of like, to really give generously and with integrity, and to live in that mindset. Just assuming people are doing the best that they can is game changing. So Brene Brown is always my role model, but this one's really got me thinking.
Oh, I love that. I'm a fan of Brene Brown as well. I've read a couple of her books, but I really liked what you said there about giving people the benefit of the doubt to put you in a different mindset. But it doesn't mean that you necessarily have to accept that somebody's best is what you need, right? It was interesting because I thought you were going one way with it, and thinking about the people that you manage, because you have a lot of people that report into you, as opposed to, do I want to leave this boss because, maybe they're not giving their best, but I was thinking about it from the standpoint of helping other people, that are giving people the benefit of the doubt, that are more junior to me, but also then being able to decide, what am I going to do with this? If this is their best, I can make a decision whether or not this is okay or not. I can either choose to help them through it and mentor, or I can choose to say, hey, actually, this isn't a good fit, and now we need to figure out, how do we help somebody into a different role, or even a different company potentially. So no, I think that's extremely insightful and beneficial, giving people the benefit of the doubt, and then being able to draw your own boundaries with it.
Yeah, I highly recommend the finale, because she goes into her whole living big philosophy, which is really cool. And it is that was the missing piece for me, because you can say to someone, oh, if you're like venting to a friend or a colleague and they're like, well, they're probably doing their best, kind of makes you more mad, because you're like, well, then am I the one being rude? But I think that it's the second piece of like, okay, if you really think they're doing their best and you decide what you're going to do with it, then you can do that without as much reservation. And that's been the game changing part of like, okay, then I'm going to know that the next step is to really coach someone or mentor them to figure out if this is the right seat. We do a lot of right person, right seat in our company, and thinking about, are they set up for success in that role, or is there a different one that needs to be set up, because it's a person can only thrive if they're matched with the right seat. So yeah, I highly recommend that the final podcast that she did.
No, that's great. All right, and then to round this out, so what do you view as the imperatives for future successful leaders within the actuarial profession specifically?
I think that the hot answer to the question for future leaders in general is like AI, machine learning. It's so important. Technology is very important. And I think it's table stakes. You have to be staying up to date, familiar with that. But I would say on the flip side, I think more important than ever is the people skills, because as we elevate and we're able to get AI to do more of our job, which is a positive if you can position yourself the right way, the people skills, I think the way that your results are used and relied on, and digging into what bias may have come forth in what the model generated, and being able to navigate the challenges that come with managing people and overseeing them and presenting your results. I think that's where actuaries can really shine in this next phase of whatever revolution we're in the middle of. But if we're known just for dropping off a report that AI eventually can generate, or a model can do the bulk of, and we aren't educating and empowering our clients, we're going to become replaced by robots. So I think the more we can hone in on those communication skills, leadership skills, management skills, really show our staff that the work they're doing is really important. It makes the work more engaging for them to want to continue to grow as an actuary. If we're empowering our clients to make decisions more effectively with that information, we're so valuable to them because they'll never be able to not have that human element. But I think that, to me, it's leaning more into the soft skills and building those. You get the technical skills through the exams and the other, continuing ed that you have to do. But I think it's the people skills that are becoming more important as we see this technology revolution take place.
No, I love that. I think that's extremely insightful as well, in that you do get the technical through the exams, through school, through even entry-level analyst work, right? You're going to get exposed to that, but to really be successful as a leader, it's developing some of those softer skills, the communications, like you said, the be able to manage people in general. I think those are extremely valuable insights.
And some of it just comes with practice. So I think you can do trainings and then pair it with your own personality, and then keep iterating, have a good coach, mentor to use as a sounding board, because you're never done developing those skills.
Yeah, and I think you have to, right? I mean, you can try to figure some of this stuff out on your own. But going back to something you said earlier, being able to adapt it to who you are is just as important. Again, thinking about executive presidents and leadership, and being able to be your authentic self. Well, the way you manage people, the way you communicate should also have that flavor as well.
Absolutely.
Oh, I love it. Well, Adrienne, I think our discussion today has been great. I appreciate your thoughts and insights, and sharing a little bit about your story and how you've gotten to be where you're at. We wish you nothing but the best in the future for Athena Actuarial Consulting and the people that you've got working with you, and you in particular. I want to thank my guest today, Adrienne Lieberthal. Adrienne, if people want to connect with you or with Athena Actuarial Consulting, what's the best way for them to reach out?
LinkedIn. Yeah, shoot me a message. Definitely follow us on LinkedIn, follow Athena, and shoot me a note. I'm always happy to connect.
Excellent. Well, please subscribe and like this podcast to help us share stories like Adrienne's that can help benefit the actuarial community. The leadership development community of the CCA is open to any actuary. You can reach out to the CCA to be able to join. I want to thank Shannon Peterson of CCA staff for helping to produce today's event. Join us for upcoming CCA events and follow us online on social media and on our website. Thanks, everyone. And thank you again, Adrienne, for joining us.
Thank you.